episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor. Welcome, everybody, once again to another episode of our show, bringing you another truly fascinating individual, helping to create a better tomorrow for all of us on many different fronts. Today, we have the honor of being joined by Dr. Arathi Sethumadhavan, who is head of user research for artificial intelligence, ethics, and society at Microsoft's Cloud+AI group, where she works at the intersection of user research, ethics, and product experience. And in her current role, she is heavily focused on the Microsoft artificial intelligence ethical principles, which we've spoken a little bit about on previous shows: privacy and consent, fairness, inclusion, accountability, and transparency across the board as it relates to various Microsoft AI experiences. Dr. Sethumadhavan is a seasoned research leader, over 2 decades of experience studying human-technology interaction. And during the course of her career, she has led user research for several novel and complex applications, including Microsoft Custom Neural Voice, facial recognition. She also worked at Medtronic, where she provided human factors leadership to multiple products in their cardiac rhythm and heart failure groups, including the world's smallest pacemaker. She also spent several years investigating the various implications of automation in areas like air traffic control and performance, situation awareness. Dr. Sethumadhavan is also a fellow at the World Economic Forum, where she is working on unlocking various opportunities for positive impact with artificial intelligence to address needs in the area of the aging population. She has published over 60 articles on a range of topics, from patient safety, effective computing, human-robot interaction, delivered 80-plus lectures, been cited by the American Psychological Association and The Economist, and has worn many hats along the way, including research leader, strategist, author, mentor, keynote speaker, sometimes professor. Her book, Designed for Health: Applications of Human Factors, was just published in 2020. And Dr. Sethumadhavan has a Ph.D. in experimental psychology with a specialization in human factors and ergonomics from Texas Tech University. A lot to talk about today, but Dr. Arathi Sethumadhavan, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Hey, thank you so much. Happy to be here.
It's great having you. I'd love to start off by handing things over to you for a few minutes, just to talk a little bit more about you. If you could sort of take us into the world, everything from where you grew up, how you got interested in computers originally, but then experimental psychology, and ultimately this domain of human factors focused research. I think that'd be a great way to start off the story.
Cool, that sounds good. So I actually grew up in Kerala, in India, which is actually where I am right now. So thank you for joining me, so early. So I did my bachelor's in computer science in Kerala, and after graduation, I started a position as a systems engineer in Siemens in Bangalore, India, and I started working there. And that's when I really realized that what I probably would enjoy doing as a career, looking long term, is working with human beings, versus working with just systems. So really working and studying about user behaviors and their motivations, and bringing the perspectives of human beings into the product development process. And always, moving to the US has always been top of mind for me. And so I ended up moving to the United States, to Texas Tech University, as you mentioned in the introduction, for grad school. I started with my master's and went on and did my Ph.D. in human factors and ergonomics. And grad school was real fun. During grad school, I spent most of my time studying the impact of automated systems on air traffic controller behavior. It's really things like reliability and how that impacts trust of air traffic controllers, and the importance of keeping the human in the loop, and situation awareness. In fact, I worked with 2 of the world's best academics, in the field of situation awareness, Dr. Frank Durso and Dr. Mike Ensley. So I had a fantastic grad school experience, so as to speak. And the reason I bring all of this up is because these are things that are talked about even today, right? The importance of keeping the human in the loop, reliance, and the consequences of over-reliance on machines. When I was in grad school, I never realized that I was actually studying the ethics of technology. I was merely studying human behavior and human performance and human cognition and perception. But looking back, I was really studying the ethics of technology even then.
Mm-hmm.
And after graduation, I moved from the aviation domain actually to healthcare, because I really think of myself as a generalist, in the sense I think that I can apply my skills to really any domain, as long as I'm able to learn the complexities associated with the domain. So I was at Medtronic in their largest business unit, which is the cardiac business unit. And really the role there was to, design out the consequences of use errors, right? And design in ease of learning and ease of use. So as you can imagine, that's like superbly important, right? Because you're creating systems that have a profound impact on people's well-being and people's lives. These are life-saving and life-changing technologies that we're talking about. So that was a fantastic experience as well. And thereafter, I did some consulting in the healthcare sector as well, mostly for pharmaceutical and med device companies. And then fast forward to today, I'm at Microsoft, and like you mentioned, I studied the ethical implications of AI. So really, my team, what we do is we bring the perspectives of the end user community and the impacted user stakeholder community, and use those insights to shape products in a responsible manner, keeping in mind Microsoft's ethical AI principles. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. And thinking about your journey into health, as you were just saying, obviously early on you were dealing with sort of the really big human factor things in terms of air traffic control. Later on you got into the world's smallest pacemaker, so different scales of this human factor science. You wrote this book, Design for Health, Applications to Human Factors, which, as the sort of Elsevier says, delves into the critical and emergent issues in healthcare and patient safety, and how the field of human factors and ergonomics plays a role in this domain. And it was really fascinating sort of looking through the book a bit. You deal with technologies like digital health and mobile health, very hot topics today. Then extremely relevant topics in terms of critical care, emergency care in the middle of a pandemic. And you also talk about resilience and how we bounce back from these issues. Really interesting sort of value chain there of everything that's going on in the world today. Talk a little bit about why you wrote this book. I know you had to bring together something like 17 different authors to contribute. And then I was also reading something you said, the book began with a bet somewhere that you weren't even planning on writing it. So tell us a little bit about the story behind it, if you would.
That's fun. So you've done some background investigation on me. So yeah. So really, this is true. This is true story. It began with a bet with a friend of mine who is a professor. It's much more easier for academics to get published, right? Especially books. It's part of their, it's part of their day-to-day existence, so as to speak. And one of my really, really good friends was bragging to me about how easy it is for him to get published, especially books, and how publishers approach him. And he sort of challenged me to say, oh my God, like, it's more harder for you, in the industry. And I'm like, oh, watch me. So it really began, that way. But jokes apart, as I mentioned, I worked in healthcare for the longest time. So I was very well aware of the challenges in the space, and most importantly, the importance of a discipline like human factors and ergonomics in solving the challenges in the space, right? Like in my book, we touch a lot of different topics, from medication safety to med device design, to stress management, to design designing mobile health technologies, to thinking about global health issues, to inclusive design in the healthcare space. So there are lots of these topics that we touch on. And really, like you mentioned, I was able to convince 17 some people to write each of these 17 chapters for me, because I wouldn't be able to write all of that on my own, because my role was really the editor, and as the editor my role was to pitch the idea to the publisher, and really that was my contribution, right? Which is, I saw a niche opportunity, with in terms of having a book such as this. It's a very applied book, because every chapter is written in the format of a case study. So it's very applied. And I believe that it's beneficial to practitioners as well as academics alike, because of its applied nature. But at the same time, bringing in theories and weaving in the practice of human factors, which is very important as academics when you're training the next generation of engineers and psychologists and health practitioners. You've got to weave in the theory as well as the application. So I saw that need or the void for a book such as this, and that's really how it came about. And of course, by the time I pitched the idea to bringing everyone on board, and then writing and the editing process and all of that, and standardization. When you have lots of different authors, you've got to come up with a book that is sort of standardized and consistent and all of that. It took about 2 years, yeah, from start to finish.
Excellent, excellent. And so transitioning from there to your role at Microsoft, you're leading this group, AI, Ethics, and Society. I read a bit about the Microsoft AI principles in the bio. We've discussed these with some of your colleagues on past episodes. Talk a little bit about your team, sort of what it's, who it's composed of, and sort of basically what you decide to do every day. Does somebody from some unit of Microsoft bring you some cool technology and say, help me figure out the ethical issues that we're going to have with this? Or what's your day typically look like in this fascinating group?
Sure. That's a great question. So yes. So I'm on a team called Ethics and Society. We are an interdisciplinary team, right? So we are user researchers, we are designers, we are product PMs, and what we do is we work with different product teams on thorny problems in the AI space, and we sort of innovate together, right? And that means doing end-to-end work, from research, design, customer-facing documentation, and so forth. Now, to your question on how something comes to us, it's a variety of different ways. I mean, normally if a certain technology involves a sensitive use of the technology, it's got profound impacts on society, such as there's an impact to human rights that we see, or there is a risk of physical injury with the technology, or there is any sort of risk of harm, psychological distress, or there's a denial of consequential services. If any of these things we see the potential for that to happen, we'll get involved with the project, right? And we'll so here's the thing, right? With every technology, there is some level of harm, right? I mean, that's I've seen that even in the med device industry, right?
Sure.
Like with every technology, there is obviously benefits, and there's the harm. And the idea is that how do we design a system in which the benefits far outweigh the harms, right? So how have we designed the technology in a manner that we are mitigating the harms, and the residual harm is as manageable or as small as possible? And that's really what we try to do through these partnerships with different product teams. And some engagements are really long with product teams, because we are, doing research, we are conducting interviews and focus groups, etc., with the impacted stakeholder community, bringing in their perspectives, and using that to shape experiences in the product direction, right? And some engagements could be much more simpler than that. Again, it depends on the complexity of the project. It depends on the composition of the product team that approaches us for assistance. So there are a variety of criteria. So hopefully I answered that question, but you had a secondary question on Microsoft's ethical principles, so I'm happy to touch on that.
Yeah, I mean, we have, Microsoft has laid out this list of these 6 ethical principles. Obviously, you have to focus. This is the core of everything you do there. But at the same time, you have customers, millions of customers around the world use various services. Talk a little bit about ethical development of artificial intelligence, not just from what you do internally, but obviously you got to guide your customers. You don't want them taking X technology and doing something really bad with it. Talk a little bit about what you see for sort of future development of ethical forms of AI.
Yeah, I mean, so I like to go back to the basics, which is the 6 ethical principles,
Please.
right? One of which is accountability. So accountability is really having that corporate responsibility for the systems that you're deploying out there. So oftentimes what happens is Microsoft is creating services that are consumed by our customers. So our responsibility doesn't just end there by saying, hey, now it's the customer's responsibility, right? So how do we empower our customers also to do the right thing? So that's very much top of mind for us as well. Let me give you an example. This year, actually, we released a new service called Custom Neural Voice. So that's Microsoft's version of synthetic speech technology. So the idea here is that you can take snippets of an audio recording of somebody and convert that into a voice font, right? So it's got tremendous great applications, right? Because imagine that being used to bolster the autonomy of somebody with speech impairments or vision impairments. It can also be used in educational settings or in museums and audiobooks, so it's great, right? But at the same time, in the wrong hands, it can be used for malicious purposes as well. So how do you design this sort of technology with the right guardrails in place, right? And how do we empower Microsoft's customers to use it in an ethical manner as well? So that was very much top of mind for us as we were designing that technology. And you can actually find all of this on Microsoft's azure.com. It's all available external facing. We created a lot of external facing documentation for our customers. For example, we worked with voice actors because we knew that these were a group of individuals whose jobs could be impacted with this particular technology, right? So how do we be fair and transparent with them? So we actually brought in voice actors to bring their perspectives into shaping this particular technology, and therefore we created a set of guidelines around transparency to actors that our customers have to adhere to. In fact, our customers are required to upload consent forms of voice actors, where the voice actors clearly indicate that they have understood how this technology works, how their voice could be used and under what scenarios, etc., right? So we require our customers to upload that. So that's part of our terms and conditions of use, right? Similarly, we have created a set of guidelines around responsible deployment of this technology as it comes to end users, right? Which is clearly communicating to the end users that the voice that they're interacting with is synthetic, so as to minimize any deception, right? And also clearly communicating the capabilities and limitations of the technology, because if something is extremely high fidelity sounding, oftentimes what happens is people have high expectations about it, right? So you need to convey the capabilities of the technology, clearly telling our customers that this may not be appropriate for all scenarios, and that's based on some of our research. So there are certain scenarios where it may not be appropriate. So clearly study the impact of the technology in the scenario where you're considering it prior to deploying it, right? And we also developed a gating process. So we vet every customer request that comes in with this technology, for this asking for this technology. It's not what I'm trying to say is it's not just broadly available. There are all of these effective guardrails in place, and that's what we mean by really that accountability, right? So empowering our customers also to do the right thing.
It's so refreshing, especially hearing it from a company the size and the scope of a Microsoft, that you've thought through these issues so elegantly and incorporate them throughout the company, and it's really refreshing, especially in current times. I'll leave it at that. You know, aside from all your responsibility at Microsoft, you're also a fellow at the World Economic Forum, specifically the Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning group, and you published a couple of very important report entitled "Designing Artificial Intelligence Technologies for Older Adults." Also, a previous article, "Aging: Looming Crisis or Booming Opportunity." And obviously, this is a very hot topic for us on the show. We touch on it from both from the perspective of sort of the therapeutic side, but also age tech, which is really booming. The numbers from a previous episode. Here in the United States alone, 127 million 60 and older, $9.3 trillion of disposable income. So a lot of potential there. Walk us through a little bit about why you wrote this report, which goes into, once again, it's very comprehensive in terms of telemedicine, wearables, and Internet of Things, and a little bit of your personal interest, and if Microsoft has an interest in aging in general, please.
So there are a couple of reasons why I'm really interested in this particular topic. One, the number of older adults are growing faster than any other age group. In fact, it's estimated to reach 1.6 billion by 2050. So this is not a small number, right? So this is not something that we can ignore. We have to absolutely acknowledge it. And today, none of the systems, healthcare, finance, nothing is created in a manner to sustain this growth in the aging population. So tackling this problem is very important, and to scale any of this, you got to rely on technology. So then the question is, where does artificial intelligence come in? So that's why I was interested in this topic. So that's number one. Number two is the fact that older adults are rarely part of the equation. They are never talked about when it comes to design of technology and other experiences. And like you rightfully said, it is an untapped opportunity, catering to the needs of older adults is an untapped opportunity. And in fact, it can be a huge competitive advantage, which is quite unfortunate that lots of tech companies don't really understand that. So that's what I was really interested in. But I'm part of the machine learning and AI platform at the World Economic Forum. So my focus was very much about how we use artificial intelligence to meet the needs of the aging population. I did a lot of research in this particular area, and I dived deep into the literature, and basically I came up with 8 different challenges in this aging space, which is one, there is aging in place, right, which is really the desire for older adults to be independent and live in the residence of their choice and participate in their community. Mobility is very important. In fact, there's evidence that shows that if you take away driving from older adults, it is very much associated with increased depressive symptoms and a lot of health consequences. So how do you give them, that mobility still, right? Health obviously is very important. Social engagement, that's really key as well. Financial health and reskilling, because more and more older adults, because they are living longer, you've got to help them live longer, but effectively and efficiently, right? Which means a lot of people have to stay in the workforce longer. Then, of course, lack of caregivers, professional caregivers is a huge problem that exists today. And because of the lack of caregivers, this puts a lot of stress on family caregivers. And from a pure monetary standpoint, it is actually estimated to be a $1.2 trillion loss in just in the United States alone. And by losses, I mean things like unpaid labor, low business productivity, lost salaries, and increased medical costs for these caregivers. So you see how all of these things are interconnected. And of course, last but not the least, there is end of life and all the planning that goes around. pain and palliative care and all of that. So this is an extremely intricate and interwoven space, and this needs to be addressed. And I felt that artificial intelligence, with my research, I felt that artificial intelligence, there are good trends, right? Like assistive bots, self-driving cars, AI-enabled wearables, voice-activated assistants, intelligent homes. See, all of these have the potential to address key age-related challenges. But the thing is, you've got to do that well, right? For anything to be adopted, it needs to be designed well, keeping in mind really the needs of older adults, including them in the product development process. But most importantly, keeping in mind the ethical elements as well, right? Because just because somebody is old does not mean that they don't have self-respect or they don't respect autonomy.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? So how do you design these technologies by balancing the need of autonomy as well as safety, right? How do you protect the data against misuse? Again, older adults can be a very vulnerable group of individuals. So how do you protect their data and their privacy? Reduce any sort of risks associated with over-reliance that caregivers may have on some of these AI systems. So that was really my principle, to come up with a set of guidelines that technology makers should be thinking through as they are developing these AI experiences for the aging population.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's such a very critical period of time in terms of this theme. So I'm so glad to see you working on this and thinking about all of these issues. A very comprehensive overview. You know, one other, you mentioned the terms intricate and interwoven, and obviously you haven't solved all issues yet with AI and machine learning, but I do have to ask you about another report that you wrote for the WEF. This one was entitled "How to Stop Modern Slavery," and an organization I think Microsoft's involved in, Tech Against Trafficking. We did a show a little bit a while ago on some of these horrible numbers. 40 million people around the world, domestic servants, forced marriage, child soldiers, and when you add in forced labor, we're talking about a crazy $150 billion a year in this really black market. Talk a little bit, obviously you haven't solved this one yet, but please give us some ideas on how maybe tech can help with this horrible scourge still on this planet.
Yeah, this is a topic that is very close to my heart. And so let me backtrack and talk a little bit about how the fellowship works with the World Economic Forum. So essentially, as part of the fellowship, what a fellow brings to the table is, when you start the fellowship, you have a lot of autonomy, basically, in terms of coming up with a topic that you're superbly passionate about, and really digging deep into the space and determining how can AI be used in that space. That's the broad scope associated with the fellowship in this particular platform at the forum. So before I started on the aging project, I focused on modern slavery, and I talked to a lot of experts in the space. I dived into the literature, lots of books and articles to understand the landscape, and like I said, I did a lot of one-on-ones with experts to understand their work, their perspectives, both from academia as well as applied work. And then, like you rightfully said, it is a huge problem, right? It is very much a global pandemic, for lack of a better term. Just in the United States alone, an estimated 403,000 individuals are directly impacted by this. But what I learned when I had these conversations with experts were, one, there are a lot of fragmented efforts in the space. In fact, the Tech Against Trafficking Coalition, what they did a review, and what they found was that there are over 300 technology tools and initiatives addressing trafficking, several of which are very redundant with each other. So that's the number one problem, I thought. Two, the availability of reliable data on things like trafficker profiles, the status of investigations, all that's very important to create AI systems to combat slavery. And oftentimes there are difficulties associated with gathering the data, storing the data, A lack of standardized data sets make it difficult for policymakers and researchers and practitioners working in the space to create effective strategies. And three, I thought that the governments holding the data and tech builders who are actually capable of building solutions should really come together and come up with initiatives. So in other words, a lot of trust building, I felt, needs to be done. And then, given the fact that a lot of multi-stakeholder collaboration needed to happen prior to building these AI solutions, I sort of felt that it was premature for me, as part of my fellowship project, which is, you know, a very short period of time, to focus on the governance of AI in this particular space. So that's why I moved on to the topic of aging. But nevertheless, you know, it was an absolute pleasure for me to have met some very, very passionate people working in the space, and just even just educating myself as a citizen, you know, in this world about this particular topic. Although it was extremely hard, you know, just even to research this topic was like extremely hard. So, you know, huge shout out. I mean, it really traumatized me, you know, just the amount of time, and it was not very long, right? Just the amount of time that I spent on it, it was extremely traumatizing just for me, just the type of content that you're exposed to, you know. So huge shout out and appreciation for the researchers and the tech builders, etc., who do just some phenomenal work in the space.
Wonderful, really wonderful.
But I did write a blog on it, yes.
So here we are, it's October 2021, we're almost to 2022. What should we be looking out for as far as Dr. Arathi Sethumadhavan in the coming year? Conferences you're going to be presenting at, TED Talks, what's coming up?
Oh gosh. So in terms of what's next, I just want to do more of the same. You know, I think technology can have profound impact on people and societies at large. So you can no longer use the excuse that one probably has heard before, right? Which is, oh, we are just introducing a piece of technology. That's no longer the situation. So you have to think about the impact that it can have on people. So just keep doing good work, making sure that I don't lose sight of the basics, which is really bringing the perspectives of the community into shaping products, because there is really no substitute for that. So yeah, so do more, but work on more, you know, more interesting spaces, more novel spaces, more challenges, more interesting domains, all that good stuff. Conferences, I mean, there are a few under works. Gosh, I can't remember the names though.
Well, let's tell people to Google. We'll tell people to Google you.
I'm horrible.
That's okay. That's okay. No, it's well, clearly you have a fascinating portfolio in front of you, with so many possibilities, and it's really it's fascinating watching you, watching some of your previous talks, reading your pieces, and really rooting you on in this very important area. And as I said, I think I take my hat off to you. I've had one on the fact that, you know, you, an organization like Microsoft, thinking about these things, and it's really important in all the products and services. So really refreshing in this day and age. And you know, for everybody that's going to be listening to this particular episode across our podcast networks or watching on the YouTube channel, you've been listening to Dr. Arathi Sethumadhavan, Head of User Research for Artificial Intelligence, Ethics and Society, Microsoft Cloud+AI. Pick up her book, Design for Health, Applications of Human Factors. Of course, Google her at the World Economic Forum and check out all her articles and previous presentations. A really fascinating portfolio. Arathi, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to us. Thanks for everything you're doing there at Microsoft. And as we say on our show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow through your initiative. It's a really fascinating story.
Hey, thank you so much, Ira, for having me. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Same here.